Greetings, law fans. Once again, this is Attorney Jeffrey Howard, here to drop some legal knowledge on you. Today we're going to talk about how to ride a bicycle safely on the roads of North Carolina. This can be somewhat of a divisive issue. Typically, you see people on one side of the fence who have bicycles and they ride their bicycles on the road and they think, by golly, we can ride on the road and you guys should watch out for us and yay, we've got every right to be on the road. On the other side of the fence, you've got the people who are driving the cars behind the bicyclists who want to run them over and think they have no business being on the road. Regardless of what you think, bicyclists do have a right to be on the road, and they have some rights and responsibilities too. So I thought it would be a good idea just to go over briefly what the rights and responsibilities of bicyclists riding on our roads are, so that all of us can be a little bit more safe. First, let's talk about where bicyclists should be riding. They should be riding to the very far right side of the road, going with traffic, of course. There are a few exceptions to that. If you're passing another vehicle as a bicyclist, you should try to do that on the left. If there is a dangerous obstruction to the far right of the road and you have to avoid it, well, then you have to avoid it. Also, as a bicyclist, when you're making a left turn, you should be in a left turn lane or to the left of the lane in order to do that. So those are the exceptions to the general rule of requiring a bicyclist to be to the right side of the road. Next question. What safety signs, like stoplights, stop signs, yields, all those things, do bicyclists have to obey? The answer is very easy. All of them. Now that means, Mr. and Mrs. Bicyclist, that if you come up to a stop sign or stop light, actually a stop light would be a better example. If you come up to a stop light, you have to stop, of course, you probably know that. But what you might not know is you have to stay stopped until it turns green. You have to essentially think like you're driving a vehicle. As long as you're doing that, generally you're going to be within the law and you're probably going to be okay and a little bit more safe. So that leads us to turning safely. A couple of things. One, if you're going to make a left turn, you have to be, as I said earlier, in the far left side of the lane or in a left turn lane if there is one. For right-hand turns, you just have to be to the far right as far as possible, like you're riding anyway. Another thing that bicyclists often forget is that they are obligated by law to use hand signals or mechanical signals if they have them when turning. If you don't know those hand signals, you know, this thing, all that stuff, you would go to Chapter 20-154B in the North Carolina General Statutes to look up what those hand signals are, and that should help you do those correctly. Next question. Where can bicycles race legally? The answer is nowhere, unless there is a legally sanctioned race, and there are a few hoops that you have to go through to get a race sanctioned under North Carolina law. You might think this is a goofy thing to put into this little talk about bicycle safety, but actually I don't think it is. For this reason, a lot of the times you see bicyclists going 2x2 together when they should be going side by side. Technically, they could be seen as racing when they're 2x2, so they could get a ticket or be just riding their bicycles in a not safe manner. So, you know, something to think about. Safety requirements. Let's talk about those briefly. All riders under 16s have to wear approved helmets. Now, I don't know what the hell an approved helmet is, but you can probably find that out. Essentially, the safest helmet you could find is probably going to be okay. For those family bicyclists, if you have a passenger who is under 40 inches or under 40 pounds, where they get that, I don't know, they have to be secured in a separate seat where they are upright. Any passenger under 16 must be seated in a separate saddle at minimum. Not necessarily a separate saddle, but on the saddle at minimum. How you do that with two people, I don't know, but you get where I'm going. Can a bicyclist be convicted of reckless driving while operating a bicycle? The answer is yes, and you might ask then, Jeffrey, why is that important? The reason why it's a big deal is that it's first a misdemeanor, which will go on your criminal record, and two, as a bicyclist, if you're convicted of reckless driving, you could be subject to punitive damages for any injuries that you cause as a result of that reckless driving. So something to think about, so just be careful. Let's talk about briefly bicycles and pedestrians. Once again, think like an automobile driver. If you're in a situation where if you were an automobile driver, you would have to yield to the pedestrian. Then as a bicyclist, you should also yield to the pedestrian. In other words, always yield to the pedestrian, and then you'll be safe. It just makes sense. What about passing vehicles? Two things. One, if a car is stopped to allow a pedestrian to do whatever that pedestrian is doing, you cannot pass that vehicle legally. You can't do it. If you do it, you're breaking the law, you're in trouble, and if you cause any injuries as a result of that, somebody's going to come get you, maybe me. If you want to pass a vehicle, as I said earlier, you should be on the left of that vehicle, at least 2 feet away, unless there's too much traffic or other danger, and that won't allow you to do that. Also, if a vehicle is attempting to pass you, you must, by law, allow it. So as a driver's trying to come over on your left, you can't start veering over to the left to make it more difficult for him. Can't allow that. Although you should point out to motorists whenever you're arguing with them about this that they are technically required by law to give you an audible signal to before they pass you. Although what I find is when you do that, you tend to get flipped off by the bicyclists who think that you're being a jerk to them. So either way, upshot is always assume the other guy doesn't know what he's doing, and that way you're probably more likely to be safe. In my opinion, it's better to be humble and safe than be legally right and dead. So just be careful out there. And thanks again for coming to my little video blog here and checking it out. Hopefully you found something useful in it. I also have a text version of these rules and a few extra ones on my North Carolina Law blog that you should be able to find when you click on North Carolina Law blog at the top part of the video, of the screen on the website, and just look for older posts. There'll be a little section that says older posts, and you can probably find it on there pretty easily. If you can't, then feel free to email me at jah@jeffreyhowardlaw.com, and I'll be glad to send you a link to it. Thanks again for joining me, and come on back. Now, you here?